Hello and welcome to the Retire to a Life You Love podcast with your host, Michelle Gessner. I'm Wendy McConnell. Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Hi, Wendy. I'm great. I'm so excited today because amidst all of the chaos going on around us, we are going to talk about something very fun, in my opinion, and in the opinion of, I'm sure, quite a few other people. We have the pleasure of Glenda Cole coming back today to this episode. She, as you may recall, was on episode 14 last February, so February of 2024, when we got to hear all about her escapades in Portugal, because Portugal is where she chose to retire. And, you know, the title of this whole show is Retire to a Life You Love. So, you know, that was such a popular episode. We thought, you know what, let's bring her back and let's talk some more about her storybook life in Portugal. So welcome, Glenda. So happy to have you.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for having me back.
I've got a whole bunch of questions to ask you. So I'm going to try not to overwhelm you with all of these questions, but, you know, inquiring minds want to know. So let's start out with just a real easy question. Just tell us what your life is like in the south of Portugal, in the Algarve region, whatever you want to tell us.
Oh, wow. I could go on and on. I'll try to keep it a little succinct. It is truly a storybook life. I mean, I live in a stunning villa I bought 4 years ago. I'm on a golf course, although I don't golf. 60% of the people here don't. And it is such a wonderful life that we all bought them anyway. Every morning I wake up to birdsong, and as the tourism company says here, over 300 days of sunshine a year. I can attest that that is true. So I look out over the most stunning vista of hills, this beautiful little whitewashed village beneath me, and the ocean. So every day it's almost a spiritual uplifting experience just to walk outside. And then I have such a fulfilling life here, I would say. I am on the board now of a nonprofit. We provide free hospice care for people in home here. And as part of that, I volunteer a couple of days a week in one of our retail stores, which is fun. And I do events. I had a really fun event this year. I put on a fashion show, which they're not that used to runway fashion shows here. And nor did they know what a silent auction was. But at the end of the event, they were pleased to raise more money than they had in an event. That was great fun. I also keep my hand in with writing. So I write for the local newspaper here, the Portugal Resident, the expat paper in English, of course. I work for International Living Magazine. I write for them as well as attend their conferences. And I also love to walk here. There is the most stunning natural beauty here. Along the coast of the Algarve, there are literally hundreds of beaches and cliffs. And there's one 10 minutes from me called Ponte Piedade that I love to walk on. There's a boardwalk. You know, the surf is hitting and you just have the most stunning vistas out over the ocean. It's incredible. So I do that. I mean, I go to dinner with friends. I shop with friends. I'm in a social club. I'm having friends over this weekend for Easter for dinner, and they had me over last weekend. So it's just an endless round of fun.
Well, I want to remind our listeners that you chose to move to Portugal. They can listen to the first episode if they want to hear more about that. We are going to link to our show notes some things that you have recorded. Like, I think there was a tour of your house. I still remember that because your house was just so gorgeous. I'm sure it still is. And you know, I think you talked a little bit about how you don't have to speak Portuguese. I think it sounds like you're trying to learn it. Maybe you've learned a little more since the last time we spoke, but I think a lot of people are worried that if they move to Portugal, they have to learn a whole new language. Do you just want to touch on that just a little bit?
Certainly, that is one of the real benefits of Portugal. This is the only country in Europe that doesn't dub their American movies over. I asked my banker why she had an American accent instead of British, because the Brits have been retiring here for generations. And she said it's because they grow up watching our movies, so they have American accents. And the truth is, I might have learned 10 more Portuguese words since last we spoke, but not much more. It's a tough language.
It is.
The wonderful news is you don't have to learn it. So certainly in the Algarve or in any city in Portugal, when I say bon dia to someone, they say, how you doing? So really English is widely spoken. It's not an issue here. Unlike most of the other countries in Europe, to really assimilate in most of the other countries in Europe, you need to speak the language.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you move in a very rural section of Portugal, that may not be true, but that's not where you are.
Correct. Yeah. If you want to
Okay.
live in the Alentejo, as they say, and raise goats, you're going to have to speak some Portuguese.
I'm not sure I want to raise goats, but maybe there are people that do. So, more power to them. Well, let's talk about some of the things that have changed since the last time we talked. You are aware that there is a lot of upset and chaos going on in the US. We could just speak volumes and go on and on about that and speak about nothing else, but we're not going to do that today. Just that, the question from this is, are you seeing an uptick in Americans moving to Portugal as a result?
Absolutely. Although I will tell you that it started long before the current chaos. When I first came here, was 7 years ago. I came in the winters, and they thought I was Canadian. They hadn't seen Americans. It was unbelievable. That has wildly changed. There is a building that about 3 years ago, they finished here. They call the American Embassy in the nearby town because it was bought up by Americans. It was actually marketed and sold by an American real estate firm. Yes, there are Americans now, certainly in the major cities, certainly here in the Algarve on the southern coast. It is wildly different than it was. Having said that, I typically don't hang out with a lot of Americans. I mean, my best friend is one's Brit, one's Irish. My neighbors are German. It's interesting. I have some American friends, but we kind of didn't move here to hang out with other Americans. We see each other every few months.
Yeah, well, I think the genesis of all this was some legislation that was passed in Portugal to get some more investment in Portugal. And they had some very relaxed rules about taxation. I'm going to jump to the question I had planned to ask you a little bit later, but let's talk about it now. This non-habitual residence provision that has pretty much ended, except for a few certain specific populations or professions, I should say. And just for our listeners who are not familiar with what that is, it used to be that foreign income was not taxed in Portugal for a period of 10 years, as I recall. And that's not, you're still under that. But for new people who are moving there now, they don't get to enjoy that provision because it just doesn't exist as the way it did. So has that had an effect on what you're seeing? And I realize you're not doing a research study, but just in your casual observations and what you're picking up on, has that had an effect at all?
So that's a terrific question. And I will tell you that, yes, it was reinstated, the tenure, but it's very different now. As you said, it's very specific to certain professions. So that kind of blanket tenure is gone. However, the truth is America and Portugal enjoy a non-taxation agreement, no double taxation. So while I pay all of my taxes in the US, the only thing I pay taxes on here is my rental income. I rent this place in July and August, and I do pay, I think, 13%. Yes, last year, it's a sliding scale, on that rental income. And that rental income in 2 months, because all the Europeans flood to the Algarve in the summer on their break, and that provides me with a lot of fun. So that rental income this year is going to fund all of my travel. I went to South Africa for a month. I did safari. I'm going to be in Paris next month, Barcelona, headed back to the US in August, probably do Spain again with friends for the holidays. 2 months a year funds all of that. I could frankly, given what's happening in the market in the US, maybe I'll forget the rest of the travel and just put it towards the mortgage. But thus far, it's been a wonderful, wonderful benefit of living here.
Now, to be clear, you're still enjoying the benefits of the old provisions. So your income is not going to be taxed at Portuguese rates, the income that originates from the US. For people who are coming in new, yes, there is a taxation treaty, so no double taxation, but the Portuguese tax rate is most likely higher than the American tax rate. So there would be a bump up in taxes for people who don't get to enjoy what you're getting to enjoy under that old provision. And that's fine. People don't just live and die by taxes. But I just wondered if you had noticed a change at all.
No one's complained to me. The newer Americans that I've talked to haven't complained about the tax situation. I will say that I was just at a conference here in Portugal with the International Living Group, and that was sold out in a week and a half with Americans wanting to live here.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, they were more concerned because they bring in their writers from around Europe for this. And they were more concerned with Spain because there's no agreement. And they were, to move to Spain, you would take a serious tax hit. I will tell you that of all the tables, there was France, Greece, Spain, Italy. My table was, when I wasn't speaking, we, worked our tables. And I will say that I had a line all the time, and that almost no one asked me that, they had already, most of them were pretty serious about it. And they had talked to attorneys, tax attorneys, specifically here in Portugal. I have a Portuguese attorney who is wonderful.
I'm not really sure about you. You had said there's no double taxation, but if you're enjoying not having to pay Portugal taxes, so does that mean that if we move there now, we're paying Portugal taxes instead of American taxes?
No. The way I believe it works, according to the Portuguese attorney who was at this event this weekend, is that you would pay the difference. So if, for example, if you're paying 15%, or I don't know what it would be, whatever you're paying, say, on your Social Security at home, right? And the what they tax on pensiones here is 20%, you might pay 5%.
Okay, so I'm still paying my taxes in America, but then I'm paying the difference to Portugal.
Correct.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So, okay, I just wanted to interject for those who are not familiar with the conference that you referenced, International Living, and you mentioned that you do some work for them. They're a group. You can join them. I'm a member, and that's how I met you, Glenda. Anyone can join International Living. It's a wonderful group. They hold a boot camp to teach people like yourself. If I think that's how you initially learned what you needed to learn before you moved to Portugal. So they teach people who want to move wherever overseas. It doesn't have to be Portugal. They give you information about a variety of different countries. And that's the boot camp that you were referencing, which just took place in the lovely country of Portugal, your backyard.
Actually, they do a separate boot camp in the U.S. that's all their writers from all over the world they bring in.
Gotcha.
I've spoken at that for the last several years. The one in Portugal was just Europe, the European writers.
Okay.
So they do a few that are country specific. Only the last 2 years have they done Europe because they've seen such an uptake in interest from Americans to move to Europe.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. And I've been to the boot camp, the one that covers the whole globe, and it's just phenomenal. So it's good information.
Yes, if I could plug it, it's going to be in Portland. I say Portugal so often I can't say the word Portland. So it's going to be in Portland this year. So I'm looking forward to that. It's in the fall, and I know that they just started marketing it. So it is, as you've seen, it's really valuable. It's not just that they have the speakers, expats who are living in all their countries and the writers. They also usually bring in attorneys. They bring in, occasionally the attorneys will speak to the tax situation. And that's how I initially, before I worked for them, I was a reader for many years, and I picked 5 countries and ended up, testing them for retirement based on their annual retirement index, which has gotten a lot of publicity this year in the U.S. And I'm looking forward. And, as you said, CBS Sunday Morning just shot an episode out at this last conference, and they ran it on the weekend, and it was a terrific episode. They talked to people in Malta who had retired there. They filmed some of the conference. There was just a groundswell of Americans, for whatever reason, looking to move to Portugal.
And to your point, they've been doing that for years. So it's not just what's going on today. It's been happening for a while. All right. So I do have to ask housing, because I've been hearing about housing. When you bought, housing was really affordable. But I'm hearing, and this is a question for you, is housing not so affordable anymore, given the high demand of folks that have come in?
Depending on where you're buying. Yes, absolutely. So yes, frankly, I could make a tidy profit right now if I sold this villa in just 4 years. But yes, prices have gone up significantly. However, when you compare the prices here to the U.S., I mean, because I could never afford this villa in the U.S. No way, couldn't touch it. And yet, although it's up, it's certainly reasonable. And the other thing, although up, is mortgage rates. Why would you not get a mortgage when you can still get one for under 4% here? Even with what's going on, hopefully, our money will continue to make over 4% in the U.S. And another beautiful tip is you can put it in a young person's name. So the Brits have done this for many years. They're very used to it here, very easy to work with the bank. When you buy a place here, you have to have your mortgage paid off in Europe by the time you're 75, typically. And obviously retiring, that doesn't make a lot of sense. However, they allow you to put it in, for my case, my son's name. The beauty of that is that I think I have a 36-year mortgage, as I recall, maybe 38, which takes your payments way down. And the other wonderful news is that prevents European inheritance taxes. So if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, he owns the place. No taxes involved.
That's big, because I know that is not the case. The inheritance laws, and again, I'm not an expert, but I have heard the inheritance laws are not so friendly in, like, for example, France.
Correct.
So that's good to hear.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up. Okay. So, hey, if you want to buy a house in Portugal and you want to get a mortgage and you're not really wanting a 15-year mortgage or a 10-year mortgage, put it in your child's name, your adult child, of course. That's what you did.
Yes. And then after a few years at this point, he would have a tidy profit, or he could choose to keep it or sell it or whatever. Yeah.
That's amazing. All right. Well, let's talk about healthcare, because I know that's another concern that people have. They're worried about, if you're going to retire in Portugal, I mean, you're looking at potential, healthcare's on your mind, and you're looking at how you're going to pay for that. So tell me what you know about that.
So yes, I speak to this a lot when I'm talking to people wanting to come over to Portugal, and because obviously we're retiring, and I personally am falling apart. So it's very important. I have a doctor here, my general practitioner, that she is South African. Her English is better than mine. And she diagnosed a couple of bizarre things that they could not diagnose in the US. I would put her up against the Mayo Clinic docs that I worked with in the US. She's that good. And I will say that typically the World Health Organization, when they rate countries on healthcare, the US is way down the list. Portugal is always in the top 10. And interesting fact that I know is that there are more hospital beds per capita and more doctors per capita in Portugal than there are in the United States. I can see my doctor the same day. I can understand that's becoming a real issue in the States. I can't, if I have an issue, typically though, I just called today. I needed an appointment. Actually, I emailed, and within a day, they get back to me same day, and they made me an appointment for Saturday morning when I could come, because I didn't need it in a hurry. Not only is it, I would say, quality is top notch, but the pricing is unbelievable, right? So it just went up because I hit a certain terrible age, and it went up to 200, about American dollars. It's about $230 a month. I just saw a neurosurgeon. My copay was $18 would be big to see a neurosurgeon.
Unbelievable.
I had a genetic test recently.
Okay.
It was €2.
That's amazing. So as I recall from my time spent at that boot camp and from talking to you previously, it's still a good idea to opt in and pay for Medicare. And so you're paying for Medicare, Part B, and you have your private insurance that you're talking about there in Portugal.
Yes. And by the way, I have a public health number that you get here, and that covers me for all my European trips for healthcare as well. Just a tidbit for free.
Nice.
But yes, I kept my Medicare, and that's really only because if I ever choose to, on my deathbed, God forbid, because it's a whole lot cheaper to die here. If I want to go back and, hold my son's hand through it all, I just decided to keep Medicare. I know people who haven't. But to me, that just shuts off an avenue for you. That doesn't take that much out of my Social Security every month.
Right. Yeah. The base premium. Yeah. So we've talked about housing. We've talked about the taxes. You didn't really talk much about your life, but what you did say sounds just amazing. Like you just, I want to go tomorrow, or if I can. Yesterday would be nice. Wendy's nodding her head. But let's talk about the other side, because it's not all peaches and roses and rainbows for everybody. So have you heard of Americans, maybe British, but let's focus on Americans who have moved over there and they regretted the decision? And if so, what do you think was the most common reason?
I will tell you, the Americans that I know that have moved here, I only know one couple that have regrets. Not anymore, but I'll tell you why. Because they decided that even though they'd never lived in a city in the United States, they thought it'd be great to move to Lisbon. So they weren't ever city people. They moved to Lisbon in a pretty short amount of time. They bought a place. So they were stuck with the place when they realized they hated city living. They loved Portugal. They are now, it took a while. They sold the place. They're now here in the Algarve, and they love their lives. that's seriously the only couple I can think of that has regrets. I will say, though, to your original point of it not all being, rainbows and unicorns, the only two things that drive me crazy here. One is the whole bureaucracy, right? And that's all over Europe. And I think all over the world. We're Americans. We're used to you have a deadline, I have a spreadsheet, and it happens. When you're in Portugal, those things don't really happen that way, from meeting at the financial office to dealing with any government issue to dealing with your handyman. The Portuguese want you to be happy. And when you say, oh, can you get this done for me by, Friday? They go, yes. And then I don't see them for 2 weeks. So, they're not consciously lying. They just so want you to be happy. But something comes up. It is very different here. And bureaucracy, if you're like I used to be, I think I probably still am, the crazy A-type, ex-business executive who thinks deadlines, I used to live my life by deadlines and meetings. Mm-hmm. It's a different thing. But I had to push myself back from that whole American thing and say, no, wait a minute. The reason really you love this place is because it's not filled with people like you who are deadline oriented, who are crazy and have to have everything. So you just have to, tamp your American down and go, wow, this is cool. And just relax. It's kind of like going to the DMV every time you have to do anything. So you just back off. And eventually, after about 2 years, I think I managed to at least tone it down.
It's probably about adjusting your expectations too, that things are not going to happen overnight. Yeah.
And truly. And the other point I would make is the one that everybody makes. And that is, I have a son that I am very close to, and it is tough to be across the world. He's in San Diego. It's really tough to be across the world from your kids. And in many people's cases at this age, grandkids. I don't have any, but I find that I actually talk to him more than I do when I'm visiting him, which is the strangest thing. Because when I'm visiting him, he's a doc and he just bought a practice and he's crazy busy, right? Well, when I'm here, he'll call me when he's driving to work. So probably literally 2 to 3 times a week. He doesn't call me when I'm, in San Diego. So I actually talk to him more when I am halfway across the world. Thanks to WhatsApp for free.
Yeah, WhatsApp is a beautiful tool for that. Now, do you find that you get more visitors though, because you're living in such a wonderful place and they can want to visit you, or not so much?
Last year I was inundated, literally went from person to person. It was a little bit nuts in the spring. Oddly, I think they all visited in the first few years. I would say I had sporadic visitors. This year, I don't have a single person visiting me, and it's a nice little break. I do have occasional people that come in that actually I just spent some time with a couple that I'd met at International Living. They were so charming, and they were coming to explore. And friends of friends came in for a day, and they, I talked to them, but they didn't stay here. So, yeah, you do see my first few years, I got a lot of people coming to stay.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put in the show notes some helpful links. You've recorded some videos that are instructional, so I'll make sure to put those links in the show notes so people can review those. They can go to International Living. We'll put that link in the show notes. But before we finish today, if you could, hindsight is 2020. If you could do things again and change anything, any of the decisions that you might have made, can you think of something that you would have done differently about your move to Portugal, how you did it, where you are, anything at all that you want to mention?
That's tough. I love where I live. I love this villa. I think the little bit of difficulty in buying the villa was putting my son through it. I should have just flown him in for a day, but having him sign all these papers and back and forth, it was crazy. And you can actually, it's a strange thing here, but you can get a life insurance policy for the buyer for super cheap, and that reduces your down payment. So it was during COVID and trying to get him into a doctor's appointments and cardiology, and he's a doc. He was like, you're killing me here, Mom. I would have flown him in for a day, set it all up here. They would have set it all up here in a day. All those appointments would have probably been, I go to a lot of my health appointments at the hospital because the doctors are there. So they could have, instead of having to drive all over the world in San Diego, he could have done it in a day here, and he'd have been much happier with me. Other than that, I truly have to say, I love my life. There's not a whole lot of downside to it at all.
Other than the distance, like you mentioned.
Yeah, that's the big one.
But it just sounds wonderful. I'm excited to share this again with our viewers, our listeners. Well, we have viewers too, because we're now recording on our YouTube channel. So it's viewers and listeners. But yeah, is there anything else?
I'm ready to put on makeup. I know that.
You look beautiful, and your happiness shines through. So, but if you want to mention anything else before we close out today's episode.
Well, the only thing I would mention, Michelle, is that a tip, because I talk to a lot of people, they go, how do I get started? So the Portuguese government has farmed out all of their visa requests through a third party in the US, and there's a website. So if you really are interested and you want to stay more than 3 months to do your exploration, I always say rent before you buy, and you want to spend as much time as possible living like a local. Well, if you want to exceed those 3 months, you need to get a residence visa. And to do that, you go on this website, which I will share. It's V as in Victor, F as in Frank, S as in Sally, vfsglobal.com. They have a list of everything you need to get together, and you need to do all that while you're in the US before you make the trip. And then, and I would recommend to people that give it a good 4 months ahead of time. There are a lot of things that need to be gathered before you have them send your application in.
That's a really great tip. I think the only other tip I heard you mention, I'd like you to mention again, is which airline do you there was something about airfare and the best way to get there that isn't exorbitantly expensive. Can you remember what that tip was?
So it's interesting because it's changed a little bit. So they just from the little airport, I'm in your airport in Faro, a little town in the Algarve. And now they have direct flights from Boston. I just found this out. They've just started doing direct to Boston. I always had to go through typically Lisbon, but sometimes Charles de Gaulle in Paris. I've been through a lot, Amsterdam. So that's a new tip that I think is a good one. I'm investigating it right now for my trip in August. So I'm a million miler on Delta. So I always, I typically use Delta. But I just signed up to Daily Drop. Do you know the Daily Drop thing?
I do not.
Okay, Daily Drop. I hate to, plug a business that I'm not that familiar with. I'm just starting with it. But so far, they're interesting because they give you lots of tips on credit cards that have insane offers with points and all these things. And I have a girlfriend who hooked me up with this, she's been doing this for several years now. And I'm like, she's, what are you in Abu Dhabi? She goes, well, they had a point special and I did it for free. So I think it takes a lot of time, but I think that's a tip that if you have the time to investigate, they have a lot of information on how you can travel the world and do it on points.
Do it on points. But for those folks who didn't catch what you said, there's a little town called Faro, Faro, in the south region of Portugal. And it has an airport, has for quite a while. But you're saying there is a new flight from Boston to Faro nonstop.
Yes, and it's United is doing it.
Oh,
so
very
I'm sure
nice.
that they are just the first. I imagine the other airlines will follow suit when they see their success.
Hey, I've got some United points. Now I know what I'm going to be doing sometime soon.
Come and visit me.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to. Well, thank you so much, Glenda. Again, we just really enjoyed having you on the show, and it was a very popular episode, by the way. So very glad that you came to join us again. If people have questions for you, how would they get in touch with you?
They are welcome to email me. It is Glenda F. Cole at yahoo.com. I get a lot of questions that way through the International Living Group, and I try to stay up on it. Not like I used to, not every 15 minutes, but yeah.
That's why she moved to Portugal, so she didn't have to look every 15 minutes, right?
Exactly right.
All right. So Michelle, how do people get in touch with you if they have some questions?
Yes, you can reach me through the website. We have all our contact information on the website, GessnerWealthStrategies.com.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies, and thank you for listening today. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, I'm Wendy McConnell.
Thank you for listening to Retire to a Life You Love with Michelle Gessner from Gessner Wealth Strategies. We hope you were inspired to take steps to your financial freedom as you learned new techniques and strategies for managing your finances. To learn more about how you can improve your financial landscape, visit our website at www.GessnerWealthStrategies.com. That's GESSNER wealthstrategies.com. Or give Michelle and her team a call at 713-589-6448. And don't forget to click the follow button below to be notified when new episodes are available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Michelle Gessner or Gessner Wealth Strategies. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.